All right. Well, a little sidetracked with some other weird ideas today. So I didn't get where I was going today, but I got somewhere else interesting. Trying to use up some of my supplies in the kitchen, trying some things out, seeing what we can make. So I made some French toast to use up some of the bread before it goes bad and starts to grow stuff on it. And part of that was I wanted to see if I could make a Swedish fish syrup. It's all right. It's not as powerful Swedish fish flavor as I would have before, but it's really hard to get the Swedish fish to melt. They don't want to melt at all. So I've been playing around in the kitchen a little bit to do some improv. I have shot a couple of taste test videos recently. That may be up in weeks, maybe months, depending on how things go. Because I've done a lot of taste test stuff, but I haven't done much else to couple that with. Now, I keep trying to figure out what it is that makes Swedish fish taste like Swedish fish. And no surprise at all, it's a heavily guarded secret. So there's some guesses, but no confirmation or real sense of this is absolutely it. So, but tasty enough. This is cookies and cream. This is some of the cheap cookies and cream chocolate eggs that are left over from Easter. And you put a little bit of butter in there and just a touch of like coconut milk or something like that to heat it up in and melt it in, and it makes a essentially a frosting or an icing. That one has the right amount of flavor. It doesn't cover the French toast flavor, but it adds to it. I can recommend that, yeah. I think if I can get the Swedish fish to melt better, and used more of them to the amount of water that I used to try to dissolve them. I could see doing both of these again. All right, so this is dinner out of the way. Cookies and cream French toast, definitely a winner there. Swedish fish French toast has promise. All righty. So, thanks for joining me with dinner. now let's get on to some of the other goofy things that I've been playing with. Okay, so one of the things I've been really thinking about lately was my world building. I've been doing some conlangs, but thinking about my gameplay, I got to thinking, like, the fun part of different languages in a fantasy setting is when somebody gets it, but not everybody gets it. So in gameplay, in video games, in tabletop games, even to a certain degree in storytelling, like, I know I used to be a huge Star Wars fan to the degree that I learned the alphabet they use called Arakbesh. And it's fun because you can put a message. It's perfectly written in English. It's an English message, but the letters they use are the Arakbesh letters. So doing watching a movie or like the Clone Wars cartoons or stuff like that, every now and then a phrase or a word will appear in Arakbesh, and it's like, ooh, what does that say? And you try to decode it. I don't have the skills for it anymore because it's been years since I did this. But being able to find out, like, what kind of Easter eggs the creative people put into it, or sometimes it's just Steve was here or something like that. And being able to know what that code means and decipher it. That's a certain level of fun in passive entertainment like movies and TV programs, and occasionally like a story or a comic or a book. But when moving into the realm of writing my own stories or making a tabletop or video game playable, tapping into that ability where you might have one or more players playing the game and you want them to, or even a reader reading the story for that matter, and you want to tip them off about a thing, but make them have to figure it out, it's so much more rewarding. So if you have a tabletop game, you can have, or let's start with a video game. If you have a video game where you have a language cipher, is what it is essentially. You're using a different alphabet to use the English language in most cases. So having that language be one they're familiar with, but making it a code that's indecipherable makes it super rewarding for the person who puts the effort in and is invested in the game. But it doesn't necessarily detract a whole lot from those who don't know if you build it right. If you build the situation right so that you don't have to crack the code, but being able to crack the code means you can figure something else out. Giving that reward to a player or so if I want to do a game where I have my setting that I've been playing at, building at, it's all well and good to base a language off of the katakana and the Celtic language. So you take Celtic linguistics, you craft some original words for the phrases you need, model the way that Celtic words are structured and some of the grammar and styling of katakana. It has a distinctiveness. It's a unique language, but it's a level of investment that most players aren't going to waste their time with. They're not going to sit there and decode that at the table for an hour and a half to 2 hours if they could do it that fast. But if you have a couple of players at a video game or a table and they're using their controller to walk through a certain scene, and they get to a location and they see the signs, and the signs say, and if they have seen that, like if you use an instruction manual on how to gameplay or an introduction with a little translation at the bottom, or you put a Rosetta Stone in there, and they keep that with them at a certain point, and then they can look it up and like look at the cipher, and it breaks down to saying go left at the next intersection, like that, without having to say like, okay, is grammatically how do you structure this kind of sentence, like without having to go through all that and make it a whole new language, just making it something you decipher and it talks to you in your own language in a video game. That would be something that I would have loved as a kid, like a puzzle that has a solution that I don't have to learn a new language to understand. And by the same token, at the tabletop, if you have a group of 5 people who, you know, one of them is playing a hobbit that can speak Elvish, if you have the means of having that player at the table, just give them a decoder ring, honestly, is what you're doing. Give them a decoder ring so that when they come across an Elvish inscription, you can show them the inscription and they can try to figure out what that inscription says. And now it goes from a word on the bottom of their character sheet to something only they can do at the table. You show a chart to a group of people with a phrase that nobody understands except for the one person with the decoder ring that can tell you what it means. That gets people into gameplay. It would get me into gameplay. I don't know about other people, but I would totally love that sort of gameplay element. And it's not something where you have to sit, you know, it's not the dissertation of Dr. Elvish McElvick face. It's not some 20-page long thing. It's usually just a sentence. But that one player who can understand what that sentence says, that's a skill that they get to play. And I kind of love the idea of doing that. So I've been playing around with just using some of the basic forms that I set up for my full language, my conlangs, and seeing if I could do a short version of it that's just a cipher for them to be able to decode things. So I've been having a little bit of fun with that, and it's a rabbit hole that when you start going down, there's a whole lot of really cool stuff out there. I just love what some people are doing. And part of it is, like, from an artistic perspective, there are some languages out there where they do very ornate calligraphy styles that I'm like, oh, I can do a lot with some artwork on that. And it brings me back to what I did last year with some of the designs for the bullet journals that I was doing. The very sort of like artistically stylistic way of keeping track of a schedule, but making it so totally look different, where like one of them is definitely an Art Deco style, and the other one was one that was fashioned to end up looking like a spell book when you're done. And you know, it'll just be your list, of your grocery list, or your schedule for the week. But when you finish it up, it looks like a prop you could use in a movie where there's summoning circles for spiritual beings or stuff like that. I mean, I love the design aspect of something like that. And, you know, when I built my world, when I started building my world, I set up my races and species to have sort of a cultural and artistic aesthetic. So the dwarves are Slavic, but their artwork is Art Deco. And the materials they use are like bone, crystal, and stone. Whereas the elves are very goth, with Gothic style scripting, but done differently. Their art style tends to be very Gothic or neo-Gothic, I guess would be a better term for it. And their materials will tend to be more along the lines of wood and some stone as well. So being able to say like who the people are, what their culture's like, and what they favor in art styles can let me play with the alphabets and the writing styles, and that's sort of really been fun. I've let it distract me from other things I probably should be doing, but I'm having a lot of fun with it. But one of the other things, what was the other thing I was going to talk about? So I've been playing around with, so I've been playing around with the languages and developing of my own world building, but I've also, in the meantime, also discovered some other games that I would like to potentially do the read through on as I check them out for the first time. One of them's not in English, so that's going to take some work. But it's interesting to note that in the US and, to a certain degree all over the world, there are Dungeons and Dragons books. People are familiar with it. But there are a few others that are like we don't have in the US that other countries have, at least at the top of, if not, near the top of. I think I said that backwards, but they're role-playing game books. So my understanding is in Germany, the German role-playing game that's most familiar to everybody is the Dark Eye role-playing game. They did translate that one into English, and I have found a copy online through a PDF purchase, a PDF role-playing supplement site, and they had a copy of the Dark Eye English version, and so I have acquired that one. I want to do a read-through of that one. It took an immense amount of work to find this next one. This one, I found it by accident. I kid you not, it's one of the most weirdest happenstances I ever happened across. But there is, there's a French role-playing game. It's probably not the top one, and I don't think there's an existing version of it currently in print. Not a a printable purchase of the solid book, even in France. I think it's old enough now that it's lapsed out of use, but it's called. Let's see if I can find it. Come on. I have it in here. I know I have it in here. You're being a dork when you fight me on this. So, desktop. Let's go back out. RPGs. And it is... Oh, come on. So, it's called, I think, in French, it's Drac Day... Or, no, Dream... What was it? Oh, come on. I have it here. It took me a week to find it. I had to actually post on to Reddit and see if anybody knew where I could find a copy of it. And somebody did finally say, yeah, you can find it over here. And sure enough, I found a copy of it. Oh, for pity's sake. There's also one in Brazil, Portuguese from Brazil that I found, and that one's not translated, but an English language version of. Okay, it's not coming up. I can't find it right now. Thieves World. No. So Dark Eye is the German one. And no, not that one. No, no, no. No, 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 no. Why is it not here? Where is is it my downloads? Okay. He's seriously taking me off now. Okay, let's pop back out here and see if we can track this baby down. Come on. Okay, it's called REVE, the Dream Ouroboros. So it's Reeve. It's basically translates as the dream. The French version, I believe, translates as the Dream of Dragons or some such thing. And basically, when I heard about this, yeah, I'm sorry it took me so long to get that squared away. When I first heard about this, it was that this game has this mythology behind it where the characters you play are dreams of dragons sleeping. And you are a character in these dreams, and multiple dragons are sharing a common dream. When that character dies or the dragon wakes, the body that the other dragons are dreaming becomes empty because the dragon that was dreaming the person into it has woken up and removed themselves from the dream realm. But when that dragon goes back to sleep, that person reemerges as somebody new. And they wake up as if from a dream of another life. And I went like, okay, that is something, and I mean this with the utmost respect, only the French could figure out a way to make that a playable game. And I said, I have to check this out. Because, I mean, I'm working on a world build where the characters are playing characters, but if they die, they pass into another world realizing that they're a part of what they used to be. And so it's like waking up in a new world. And I went, it's not the same thing, but it's similar enough that it's worthwhile checking out. So I wanted to find a copy of this to check out. I spent days hunting for one. They did release it in English, and then they don't have it for sale in any place. I looked on Amazon, and Amazon has a copy on there for $100. I'm not paying $100 for that. But the PDF is available through an online vendor. You just can't find it through a search. And so it took me forever to find it. And I'm trying not to look at it right now because I want to review it for the first time on a video. And part of what I want to do with all of these is review them individually as a read through. And I don't know that I'll be able to get anybody together to do any playthroughs with them. I do have with the Dark Eye from Germany, there was a single player game that you could do. And so I want to explore that a little bit further and give that a try. And then there are a couple others out there. Let's see if I can get this where it needs to go. There we go. Okay. So being able to do the dark eye, and then the Rêve, the Dream Ouroboros, the French Dreaming Dragons. That one's worth exploring. And what I'd like to also bring to your attention, there's the Brazilian, the Portuguese one that I'm a little back and forth on. It's an anime themed tabletop role playing game. I'm like, I'm not super worried about that. But there's also, I'm building a collection of these things because I do want to check them out and review them. So there's a Cthulhu one, which I don't know where it's from. I want to say I think the creator was American, so it's not D&D though. This one's very different. It's called, oh come on, tell me I've lost this one too. God, I gotta sort these out better. De Profundis. It has to be European. It's basically somebody who's so in love with the styles of H.P. Lovecraft that they created a letter writing game that you can do by mail or potentially by email or by chat feature, where you write letters about the events going on as a person experiencing the world of Lovecraft. And so it's like, my dearest something or other, you will never believe the story I heard down at the dock today about the island we're going to for our archaeological dig. And like, that's how you play the game. You write letters to each other as characters in a H.P. Lovecraft style story. And I'm like, that could be lots of fun. That could be so much fun. And I want to try that one. I want to try, and I guess you could do a solo play on that. I want to do the Dark Eye, the Dragon Dream one. We also have, I would love to do a playthrough of my own setting as just a one-off adventure. There are some translations of 5e to other genres. So there's like a science fiction or a cyberpunk setting. I'd like to check those out. There's a system called Drama System that's also called Hellfolk. And it's a different style of role-playing game that I kind of want to check out. There's Ironsworn that I also want to check out. So Ironsworn, I have a Men in Black role-playing game version. I have some books somewhere for the Star Wars role-playing game. And okay, so we've got 3DT, which is the Brazilian one. That is a anime style storytelling. There's the Song of Day. I mean, everybody knows the Call of Cthulhu board game, so I'm not in a hurry about that one. The Cipher System is one I want to check out. De Profundis. I'm kind of curious about the Doctor Who role-playing game too. Magical Industries, Industrial. Oh, okay, I know that one. Yep. There's a webcomic for a guy who I'm a fan of his webcomic, Modest Medusa. And he created a role-playing game for that setting. And I'm curious about it. It seems like the mechanics are very different from anything else, so it'd be worth looking into it. It's called The Magical Land of Yeld. Okay, Marvel. Oh, and then there's Mitchtim, Fluffy Adventures, which is, I guess, a role-playing game with little gerbil-like characters. I'd like to explore that. Microscope is one I want to check out. And the Mythic role-playing game is a single-player option game. There's something called Pocket Dungeon Quest. I could check that one out. Okay, I don't know how to pronounce this one. It's RYUUTAMA, the Natural Fantasy Role-Playing Game. This one sounded interesting. This one is ordinary craftspeople and village folk on a traveling journey. It's not a soldiers in armor going to war kind of game necessarily. It's cooks and farmers on pilgrimages. And I feel like this has the potential to be a really good foundation for building like a tabletop role-playing version of the Dragon Quest or Dragon Warrior games, or I suppose you could go into the direction of the Final Fantasy, original Final Fantasy games. And I'd love to see, like, I want to sit down and just play with it and see if it has that potential. City of Eternal Rain. Starfinder is Pathfinder in space. Okay, so we're getting close to. There's Torg the Drama System. I don't know if I'm up for that one. I hear it's a big mess. Wendy's The Feast of Legends is one I would play with too. But okay, so now we're gonna touch on one that has sort of bitten me and won't let go, but it's frustrating me. Like the 3DT is in Portuguese, and I could give or take that one. I'm not in any hurry. I've got a couple other systems for anime style gaming that I could play with here. But there is a game called Trudvang Chronicles that is from Sweden. It's the one they translated over to English, but it's an entirely different setting than the classic game from Sweden. It uses some of the same mechanics. It's basically what they did was they've had a game for a long time in Sweden that is a very popular, well-known role-playing. It is the Dungeons and Dragons of Sweden, as far as I've been able to decipher. It is their game. And they had never made, as far as I could ever tell, an English version. They have a whole setting. They've had characters and a history and a whole backstory, just like we have the different versions of Dungeons and Dragons in the US. The original, the advanced second edition, third, 3.5, 4. We're on 5 now. So we have multiple versions of D&D over the history of D&D. They have the exact same thing for their system. But they've never translated it over into English until a few years ago. They came out with a game for the English players to play the game. As far as I can tell, the mechanics are the same. They made an entirely new setting with entirely different systems of certain things, like how the world works. They just used the mechanics of their own game for a whole new setting targeted specifically for the US or English speaking world. And I'm just kind of like, what? Yes, I'll look at your English version of thing, but I want the original version of the thing. Well, took me a little while. The company that produces it, I can download a PDF of it. It will be in Swedish. I do not speak or read Swedish. But there is Google Translate. And I do know a few people who might be able to help me with a little buggy translation every now and then. And so I'm like, ooh, do I buy a copy of a book in a language I don't speak and devote the time to translate it so I can check this game out? Because here's the thing. The artwork is gorgeous. It sounds like it's got a loyal fan base and it's been running for decades. It sounds like it's worth checking out. And I can get a PDF of the core rules for about $11. And then the setting specific information, well, they'll give you some of that in the core rules, but they also have a setting guide. And that's another $11. So for $22, I can get 2 big books full of a language I don't read about a game that hasn't ever come out in my language that I want to check out. It's sort of like it's the sort of like the goose egg, the Easter egg that I've been looking for, that hidden treasure that I can crack. And it's called Drakar och Demoner. And it's dragons and demons or something of the sort. And so I'm like, I kind of want to check it out. And looking at some of the stuff for this game, like from what I could see, running it through a Google Translate, it probably has a lot in common with D&D, and it's not going to be like a huge difference. It's going to have some differences. But one of the things, like, I don't know if they're serious or like, it makes me question how serious a game it is. Because one of the types of characters you can play, let's see if I can get the screen lined up better, because I want to show this to you. It's perfect. You can play an anthropomorphic duck. I mean, the rest of the characters are elves and humans and dwarves, and it has a wolf population, like a werewolf species. But I mean, it's pretty standard fantasy fare with a little bit of its own spin and a very sort of a Norse history element to it. But then just chunked in there are these duck characters. And I'm super curious. Like, it's not just the duck, but it's like, it hints that this isn't just D&D, but it's also enough like a role-playing game that I'm familiar with that it's going to be interesting to explore. And so I think I'm going to put the money in and get it. It seems like a weird way to spend my money, but I kind of want to check it out. But I have a whole list of these games that I would love to check out and just do a preliminary read through. And I'm probably going to do them as edited videos, because me doing this right here is probably not the best content in the world. Me trying to sort things out here, and if I can cut out the dead space and do a more concise look at, I think that would be the better way to go. But yeah, I'm super fascinated by this possibility of of checking out this game. That's going to be the hardest work there, because the German one and the French one I found English translations of. The Portuguese one I can take or leave. I do have the other one that's Swedish, the one they made specifically for the English-speaking world that I could check out too. Iron Sworn, the H.P. Lovecraft themed one. So I have a fair number of these that I can explore over the next few weeks if I wanted to. I think I might hold off to the start of May and sort of get a clean start at the start of the month. But I will probably be doing some of this in the background, the translation of the Drakar och Demonar. There's so much interesting stuff out there to explore. I know it's weird that I've latched on to doing role-playing games as one of the fascinations that's got my brain this year. But I'm having fun. I hope I can find some other people who find this as amusing or as fun as I do. All right, I'm coming up on 45 minutes here. I didn't get to talk about the story writing that I was supposedly doing today. I didn't do anything with it today. So I'll come back and talk about that tomorrow, I guess. Because it doesn't feel right to tack it onto this one. This was just me goofing off and enjoying creative exploration right now. So thanks for sticking with me if you stuck through the whole ramble and the dead space while I try to get files to show up on my computer. I will catch you tomorrow. Take care. Have a good night. I hopefully had that as public.